You're 14 years old and someone just handed you a radio. That's your entire job today. Sit on this corner. Watch the street. If you see a police car, you press one button. That's it. Welcome to the bottom rank of the Medellín Cartel. By the end of this, you'll understand something most people never think about. Almost everyone who ever held a rank in this organization ended up dead or in prison before they turned 45. Almost everyone. Not quite everyone. And the difference between those two groups comes down to exactly where you sit on this ladder. The year is the early 1980s. The place is Medellín, Colombia, a city climbing up the sides of a mountain valley, poor on the outskirts, wealthy in the center, and about to become the most violent city on earth. You didn't apply for this job. Nobody fills out paperwork to join a cartel. Someone in your neighborhood already works for the organization. Maybe a cousin. Maybe a friend's older brother. He tells you there's money in it. Real money. More than your father makes in a month, for a few hours of sitting on a corner with a radio. You say yes. At the bottom, they call people like you a Campanero, a benga, or a halcon, a hawk. Your job is simple. Watch the street. Watch the roads leading into the neighborhood. If police vehicles show up, if strangers show up, if anyone unfamiliar walks through, you radio it in immediately. You're paid weekly in cash, in a neighborhood where most people don't have steady work at all. You don't touch the product. You don't carry weapons, most of the time. You're not important enough to be a target. But here's the detail that matters. You're also not important enough to be protected. If police raid the block, you're the one standing on the corner when they arrive. There are thousands of you, spread across every neighborhood the cartel operates in. Kids mostly, some as young as 11 or 12. An entire early warning system built out of children who need the money more than they need to ask questions. You learn the rhythm of your street better than any adult who's lived there for decades. Which cars belong, which ones don't. What time the patrol usually passes, and what it means if it passes twice. Nobody trains you formally for this. An older kid shows you the ropes for a week, then leaves you to it. You're not told the names of the people whose shipments you're protecting. You're not told where the product goes after it leaves your block. You know your radio, your corner, and your weekly pay, and that's the entire boundary of your world. For a while, this feels less like crime and more like a job. You show up. You watch. You go home. It's only later, once you climb higher, that you start to understand exactly what you were protecting and how much blood already sat behind it. Move up one rank, and the job changes completely. Now you're a Mula, a mule. Your job is to move the product, sometimes across a city, sometimes across a border, sometimes onto a plane bound for Miami or Los Angeles. You might carry it in a suitcase with a false bottom. You might carry it strapped to your body. Some mules, in the most extreme cases, swallow it, wrapped tightly enough to survive the trip through their own digestive system, and pray the wrapping doesn't fail before they reach the bathroom on the other end. If it fails, you die, quietly on a plane, with nobody around you understanding why. The pay is significantly better than watching a street corner. But so is the risk. Mules are the ones customs agents are trained to look for. Mules are the ones who fill prison cells in 3 different countries. And here's the part that rarely gets mentioned. If you get caught, the organization doesn't send a lawyer. It simply finds a replacement. You were never irreplaceable. You were a delivery method. Climb another rank, and you meet a very different kind of employee. The Sicario, a hired killer. Usually a teenager, sometimes barely out of childhood, recruited specifically because a 17-year-old on a motorcycle draws far less suspicion than a grown man with a gun. The cartel's philosophy toward law enforcement, politicians, and rivals becomes brutally simple during this era. Plata or Plomo, silver or lead. Take the bribe or take the bullet. As a Sicario, you're the one delivering the second option. You're paid per job. The amount depends on the target. A rival dealer might be worth a few $100s. A police officer, a judge, a journalist, worth considerably more. You ride 2 to a motorcycle, 1 driving, 1 shooting, in and out in seconds, disappearing into traffic before anyone can react. Some estimates from this period suggest hundreds of police officers were killed by Sicarios in Medellín alone in just a few years. An entire generation of young men in the city's poorest neighborhoods grew up seeing this as one of the only paths to real money. Most Sicarios don't retire from the job. They don't get promoted out of it either. The average career, according to those who study this era, lasts only a few violent years before prison or a rival's bullet ends it. You know this going in. Every Sicario does. Some carry small religious medals, praying to be protected on a job that, statistically, they're unlikely to survive for long. Priests in some Medellín neighborhoods during this period reportedly blessed weapons alongside newborns, in a city where the two worlds had become impossible to separate. The organization doesn't ask you to think about the odds. It asks you to be fast, loyal, and willing. In exchange for a few years, you have more cash than your entire family has ever seen at once. But some ranks above the Sicarios never touch a weapon at all. Deep in the jungle, far from any city, sit processing labs. Here, the raw coca product gets refined into something far more valuable and far more dangerous to produce. The people running these labs aren't gunmen. They're technicians, paid extremely well, kept extremely isolated, and watched closely, because a lab like this represents an enormous financial investment the organization cannot afford to lose to a leak, a raid, or a mistake. You don't know the names of the Sicarios. They don't know your face. That's intentional. In an organization built on secrecy, the less any one person knows, the less damage they can do if they're ever caught and start talking. Above the labs sit the people who move the product internationally. Pilots, boat captains, men who understand shipping routes, radar coverage, and exactly which stretch of open ocean gets the least attention from patrol planes. At the height of the cartel's power, cargo planes reportedly moved product by the ton, not the kilogram, into the United States. Entire fleets, entire private airstrips, built and maintained for one purpose. This rank requires connections most street-level members will never have: pilots, customs contacts, warehouse owners willing to look the other way for a price, and that price gets paid by the next rank up. The financial operators, somebody has to count the money. An organization moving this much cash faces a strange, almost absurd problem. There's simply too much of it to store normally. Cash gets buried. Cash gets hidden in walls, in warehouses, in barns. Reports from this era describe the cartel spending significant sums annually just on rubber bands to bundle the stacks of currency piling up faster than it could be laundered or spent. The financial operators are the ones who solve this problem, moving money through shell businesses. Real estate, legitimate companies used as fronts to make illegal profits look like ordinary income. This rank rarely appears in the violence. But without it, none of the violence below it would have a purpose. Money with nowhere to go is just paper. You spend your days differently than almost everyone else on this ladder. No radios, no weapons. Instead, spreadsheets, property deeds, and the constant, quiet pressure of making an impossible amount of cash disappear into the legal economy without drawing attention. A single financial operator might oversee more wealth passing through their hands in a month than most legitimate banks handle from an entire branch. And yet, on paper, you might simply be listed as a modest business owner, or an accountant for a company nobody outside the organization has ever heard of. Above the financial operators sit the regional bosses, the men who control entire plazas, territories where every dealer, every corner, every Sicario answers to them specifically. A plaza boss collects a cut from everyone operating beneath him. In exchange, he provides protection, supplies, and access to the organization's resources. This is the rank where real wealth begins. Houses, vehicles, political connections. A plaza boss isn't hiding on a street corner anymore. He's meeting with local officials, negotiating which police units can be paid off and which ones need to be avoided entirely. He's also, by this point, a target for rival organizations, for the police units that can't be bought, and eventually for the government itself. You move differently at this rank. Armored vehicles, a rotating group of bodyguards, multiple safe houses, none of which you stay in for more than a few nights at a time. The wealth is real, but so is the awareness, every single day, that someone below you might be offered more money to end your life than they currently make protecting it. Loyalty in this organization is rented, not owned, and every rank knows it, all the way to the very top. At the very top of this structure sits the inner circle, a small handful of men who built the organization from nothing and now oversee its entire operation, from the coca fields to the streets of American cities thousands of miles away. And above even them sits one man, Pablo Escobar. By the mid-1980s, Escobar isn't simply the head of a criminal organization. He's one of the wealthiest men on the planet, with an estimated fortune reportedly compared, at its peak, to some of the largest corporations in the world. He started, according to widely reported accounts, far closer to the bottom of this ladder than most people assume. Petty theft as a teenager, small-scale smuggling in his 20s. By the time cocaine demand exploded in the United States during the late 1970s, he was already positioned to control the supply chain feeding it, from the coca fields of Colombia and Peru, straight to the streets of Miami. He builds housing developments for the poor in Medellín, entire neighborhoods that still bear his name today. He funds soccer fields, hospitals, churches. In parts of the city, people call him a benefactor. Outside those neighborhoods, he's responsible for a level of violence Colombia had never experienced before. He's elected as an alternate member of Colombia's Congress in 1982, before his criminal empire becomes impossible for the government to ignore. When the Colombian government finally moves against him, Escobar responds the way he built his entire organization. Plata Plomo on a national scale. Bombings, assassinations of judges, presidential candidates, and law enforcement officials. An entire campaign designed to make the cost of prosecuting him higher than any government official is willing to pay. In 1991, facing extradition to the United States, Escobar negotiates a surrender unlike anything seen before or since. He agrees to go to prison, on the condition that he essentially builds it himself. The result is La Catedral, a luxury compound disguised as a prison, complete with a soccer field, a bar, and a view of the mountains he grew up in. He continues running his empire from inside its walls. The Colombian government eventually realizes the arrangement for what it is and moves to transfer him to a real facility. Escobar walks out before they arrive. For over a year afterward, he becomes the most hunted man in the world. A joint task force, the Colombian National Police and American intelligence agencies close in, using surveillance, informants, and radio triangulation to track him from safe house to safe house. On December 2, 1993, one day after his 44th birthday, police corner him on a rooftop in a Medellín neighborhood. He's shot and killed within minutes. The man at the very top of the ladder you started climbing at the beginning of this video doesn't retire wealthy. He doesn't disappear into a quiet life somewhere else. He dies on a rooftop, one street over from the city he grew up in, hunted by the same government he spent a decade trying to outlast. So think back to where you started. A radio, a street corner, and a promise of easy money. Every rank above that corner offered more wealth, more danger, and less chance of ever walking away from the organization on your own terms. The Sicario doesn't retire. The Mule doesn't retire. The Plaza boss doesn't retire. And in the end, neither did the man at the very top. If you want to understand exactly how the manhunt for Escobar actually worked, and the informant whose phone call finally ended it, that story is next. If you want the true crime stories the headlines never fully explained, subscribe. That's what this channel is.